So I have two videos waiting to be released. One is the next part of the Donbass documentary. The other is is an exploration of crime think and Stop Huntington Animal Cruelty. And yeah, so Crime Thing, for those who don't know, is an anarchist book publisher that came out of the hardcore punk scene, I think, in the early 90s. So you're like, oh, that's great. But no, early 90s is when postmodernism took off. So they're like, they're the anarchists you see today in America, spawned from Crime Think. So much of the stuff that you think of as, like Antifa, decentralized networks, pronouns, all that shit was grown in a petri dish, whatever that is, of the petri dish of Crime Think. And yeah, I want to pick up a discussion we've been having previously about Shaq. There were some people who commented last time who said they were somehow associated with the campaign. So I'd like to bring them back into the conversation and hopefully respond to the questions that you didn't get answered last time. But also, I think I'm going to do a bunch of videos in response to like what Karen's doing, because it's the thing that I'm watching on YouTube. So the Eyes Wide Mess We're In video that I made didn't really present the information in the most damning way possible. I was just kind of making a joke. So I wanted to recollect the information, because essentially the argument, as far as I can see, is fairly straightforward, right? So there has been a strong connection between gender identity and the pedo-apologia that people like Blanchard and Bailey push. I mean, John Money argued for the destigmatization of pedophilia, Foucault, all those people that we learned about in the Bad and Pedo Nada video. So it's not just like a quaint thing for these people to be associated with a organization that is claiming to treat families and children with rapid onset gender dysphoria. It's fairly self-explanatory. And so people have been saying, well, what's the connection here? And the connection is, I'm going to have to rewatch the Genspect rebuttal video, that the 3-hour one that Karen made. I saw someone making fun of her for spending 3 hours on it, but that shows the strength of her case, I think, that she sat there and read through basically everything they said, whereas there's no way they will even quote what Karen says. Instead, they construct these straw men and present the information in this deliberately obscuring sense. So, for example, one of the things that's really telling about the Genspect rebuttal is that it never actually confirms that there is such a group as virtuous pedophiles. It's kind of left open-ended as to whether or not that is even actually a thing, or whether that's just something that's been fabricated from nowhere. What's significant about this is at the beginning of the rebuttal, Genspect is like, this issue is hard to understand, it's so confusing, and they don't do anything to make it less confusing, because to make it less confusing, you would say, there is a group called Virtuous Pedophiles. Ray Blanchard and Michael Bailey support this group. We have had those people on our podcast. We don't think that there's a problem with that because of the value of their work and learning from them, blah, blah, blah. And that would be actually owning the association and going, yes, this is what's happened and this is why we're going to continue to do what we want to do. But instead, they don't actually talk about the fact that there is a website, and they don't talk about the fact that it's specifically Ray Blanchard and Michael Bailey who are on this website. And the only reason that you would do that is because you're trying to leave open-ended the possibility of working with them in the future. Because other people are saying, well, how can you prove that there's an ongoing relationship between Genspect and these guys? And it's like, because they haven't publicly severed the relationship, why would you assume that it wasn't? Particularly given that they've felt the need to respond and address the situation. So there, obviously concerned about this enough to have sat down and apparently workshopped a collective response to this. So they see it as a serious threat, but instead of going, you're right, it is inappropriate for an organization that works with families with children to be associated in a professional capacity, however tangentially, with men who seek to destigmatize the desire to rape children. And there's been 2 really terrible responses from people championing Genspect. One is to go, no, you're a pedophile. Which every pageant mom or parent of a drag kid has said at one point or another. And then the second response is, well, then what are we supposed to do? Isn't you're just going to throw away everything that Genspect does? And again, it's like not really clear what Genspect does, but also, yeah, definitely. There are lots of organizations I would shut down over an association with people who want to destigmatize the desire to rape children. Because the other thing is, once you've accepted these guys, then you're also saying that you're not going to exclude anyone else on this basis either. There's apparently nothing wrong with it. Which, like, if you're an edgelord forum, like if you're the darkest corner of 4chan, then I can see why you might be psychotic enough to be motivated to do that. But presumably that's not the case here. This is supposed to be an organization that is working with families with children. So you're not just like Joe Rogan. No one's giving their kids to Joe Rogan. Secondly, this is exactly the same argument that would have been made in defense of the church. Like, look at all, do you want all the feeding the homeless programs to disappear? Well, shut up about the priest. Why would you hurt the church? Do you hate God? Where are we supposed to pray? If I die and go to hell because I wasn't able to pray because you shut down the church, oh, it's fucking ridiculous. Oh, and another one. Graham Linehan, I was looking at his getter the other day, and he had a thing there that was like a post by the FBI saying these are symbols that that pedophiles use to signal their preference in children and then other preferences within that preference. And so one of the key problems with these symbols was stated in the headline, which was that it allows people to signal this preference. And what does virtuous pedophilia do if not allow pedophiles to signal that preference in a socially acceptable way? On top of which, he later wrote posted a thing which was about the guy who invented the trans flag, which again is another person who has a questionable, I guess I'll say it like this. He wrote pedophilic fan fiction, or at least something that bordered very closely to that. Yeah, no, that's what it was. But like all this shit, it was shrouded in metaphor. And one of the things about the trans flag is it also mirrors these pedophilia symbols with the pink and blue and white. Those are the colors on the pedophiles' flags, and they're also the colors of the trans flag. Yeah, so to just be so flippant and be like, oh, who cares if we're validating or apologizing for people who are trying to... Like, why would you take that association too? Because until... like... One of the biggest arguments against gender identity ideology is its long lineage of pedophile pioneers.
I was living in a devil town.
Yet somehow we're supposed to believe that it's not incredibly suspect that they would bring that up so much for some reason. Like, I'll tell you right now, no one who is not like a secret pedophile would say anything like that. Maybe like once, like as a joke or something, a really shitty joke, but not like consistently over the course of
decades.
Now,
they have
stopped saying this since then because they realized how absolutely untenable it is for
them
as someone who wants to make money online to keep saying shit like this. So
they have
tried to dial it back. There's so much more.
He
said that exact same thing so many times. It is beyond suspect. Jesus, man. Like, there's no context where anything that
they are
saying here is remotely not suspect, okay? Normal people don't utter the words that
they are
uttering here. This is not a thing that people would ever even think to say. unless they actually think this.
So why would the gender critical movement unnecessarily attach itself to basically the John Moneys that are still alive? They've obviously had to taper their craziness to the times the same way that, John Money wasn't able to use baboon balls like the John Moneys in Germany a few decades earlier. But they're the same people. Like, transing is sexual violence against children. So to be completely flippant about genuine concern around an association with people that want to destigmatize the desire to rape children seems like, when you're running a business and someone makes a complaint, even if the complaint is completely crazy, you still treat it professionally, because then otherwise you look insane too. And so to have people like responding saying like, no, you're a pedophile and you fantasize about raping children, or even worse, if you don't shut up, then Christmas is cancelled.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year!